less than 1%ers that can afford that car.
Right. Yeah, the rest of the people are already sitting sideline at the sporting event.
Exactly.
Not seeing the commercial.
Okay.
This is the Chris Duel Show.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Yeah.
Now, Chris Duel.
We did it! We did it, Cowboys fans. We did it, America. We made it through the Dak Prescott story. We are out on the other side. Dak Prescott, officially a Dallas Cowboy for years to come. Welcome, everyone, to the Chris Duel Show. My name is Shannon Sweeney. Some of you call me Salty. It's because I am. And joining me today is Mr. Andy Everett, who is in Frisco this morning. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. And we are up here getting ready for Conference USA action. Everybody starts playing today, or some teams play today. The rest play during the rest of the week. And UTSA will tip it off tomorrow afternoon at evening, 5:30 start time. We'll be on the air at 5 on Ticket 760 in San Antonio. And looking forward to hopefully spending at least a week here and then another week in Indianapolis next week if UTSA can pull off a conference championship.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We will definitely talk some Tiger Woods with you because you are the ultimate golf enthusiast.
I am a Tiger Woods apologist.
I mean, and you brought up some really great points. So when we were comparing notes the other day, but right after we exchanged emails, this Dak Prescott news comes down, and then later last night, Les Miles is relieved from his duties at Kansas. So plenty to get into today. I want to go ahead and start everyone off with our poll question for today. After the big news yesterday, I couldn't help myself. What percentage do you give the Dallas Cowboys to make the Super Bowl within the next 4 years with Dak Prescott as their QB? We're doing percentages here, so 0 to 25%, 26 to 50%. 51 to 75%, and 76 to 100%. Right now, most people saying 0 to 25%. That kind of upsets me a little bit as a Cowboys fan.
I'll go to the third level. I think that the Cowboys are going to be good as long as Dak Prescott stays healthy. I think they would have been a much better team last year had he been healthy. No disrespect to Andy Dalton, but in this league today, you have to be able to move around. And Andy Dalton once could move around. He can't anymore. That would have bought them some wins. Now, obviously, what they do in the draft and what they do in free agency between now and September is going to be a big key. They've got to make the offensive line better. They've got to shore up a few spots on the defense. But while a lot of people think the Cowboys are years away or players away, I think they're maybe 2 or 3 players away. And if they could have a couple of better offensive linemen to give Dak a little bit of time and to get Ezekiel Elliott back to being the Ezekiel Elliott of old. I mean, last year, Pollard was a better running back than Elliott was for a lot of the season. So the Cowboys have to figure out a way to make Ezekiel Elliott a 1,500-yard or plus yard rusher and get back to their old MO that on 3rd and 2, we're going to run the ball 50% of the time. And if they can do that, they're certainly the best team in the East. And after that, anything's possible.
There's plenty of weapons on the Dallas Cowboys, specifically offensively, but it's the people who do the grunt work are areas that the Cowboys need to fill. It's great that they signed Dak Prescott. One of the biggest reliefs is that now they can focus on those other areas that need fixing, the secondary, the linebacker position, because your 2 greatest guys, Sean Lee and Leighton Vander Esch, are constantly in question of will they or won't they play each and every Sunday. And then, as you mentioned, that offensive line to help Zeke get back to the big-time runner that earned him that big-time payday before Dak got paid.
Yeah, and $160 million, $40 million a year. I'm just curious as to how much that's going to handicap them salary cap-wise. I've said and been kind of on record for the last 2 years, I think Zeke is Prescott is somewhere in the $34 to $37 million a year type player. The Cowboys have extended that out to 40. And you're not Patrick Mahomes money yet, but you're starting to get into top 4 or 5 quarterback range. And there's going to be others that surpass that in years to come. And I'm just, from a Cowboy perspective, they hopefully they have a plan to be able to fit others into their plans so that they can get those guys necessary around Dak. I think if you look at, to me, the best quarterback in the last 10 years, obviously Brady has won a lot of Super Bowls, but Aaron Rodgers has won on smoke and mirrors. He's had the least amount of talent around him and still figured out a way to win because he's that good. I don't think you could put Dak Prescott on the Green Bay Packers and make them as successful as Aaron Rodgers has made them. So that's why I've always put him a notch or 2 below those elite quarterbacks. Great, good, not elite. And now he's got to be great unless the Cowboys can get those bodies around him that he desperately needs.
And after this contract, Dak is now the second highest paid quarterback on average. Of course, he also ranks in about $50 million a year from his endorsements. He has over 11 endorsements since he's been the Dallas Cowboys quarterback, and I'm sure he'll continue to rank in those big dollars as his career goes on. I myself, like you, I'm in that third tier, that 51 to 75% range. Look, the Dallas Cowboys should be winning the NFC East every year, so that automatically,
especially as bad as the other three teams are.
Exactly. So you need a chance to get there, and if they can get themselves in the right position, and the Cowboys can fall themselves into a Super Bowl. I'd obviously like them to win it and be dominant, but I think to get the chance to get into the playoffs, they can maybe do something special, but like we said, they still do have some pieces to figure out, but those can all now be priority with Dak now being locked in as Dallas Cowboys.
And you don't have
big
to,
news yesterday.
And you don't have to worry anymore about, okay, who's going to be our quarterback next year or the year after. Now, obviously, Dak's got to stay healthy. He can't get hurt because there's just not enough money in professional sports now with salary caps outside of baseball to where you can have a legitimate backup quarterback. I mean, the New Orleans Saints are probably the only team. They had three. They had Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill and Drew Brees. And they could have plugged any of those guys in there and probably been pretty good. Now, I don't think any of the other two are as good as Brees, but they didn't drop a lot because now they can use Taysom Hill as a utility player, and maybe they'll do the same thing with Jameis Winston in the future. But the Cowboys, whoever comes back as their backup quarterback, won't be anywhere in the same ballpark as Prescott. So it's imperative that he stay healthy.
Yeah, and there are some good options out there. Obviously, the Red Rifle still available. Doesn't look like he'd be coming back. I think the Cowboys would have already signed him if that were the case. But Alex Smith gets released from the Washington Redskins, and Ryan Fitzpatrick, because he's still planning to play in the NFL, and he is a free agent as well.
Either one of those would be excellent backup choices.
Yes, veteran status, great leadership abilities, and can seemingly get the job done. And then there's also the question of the Chicago Bears, a place that's still on the list of Russell Wilson. Should he leave the Seahawks? Of course, now his chances of the Cowboys that door's officially closed. We don't need to talk about that anymore. But could
I love Russell Wilson as a player, but Dak Prescott 7 years younger, I think. So I would go with that. And I just wish that Russell Wilson could make things up in Seattle, because he's the heartbeat of that city. Back when I was doing some of the games in the WNBA for the Stars and Silver Stars in San Antonio, we went to Seattle almost every year, and almost every game I was there. He and his wife were on the baseline front row, and he goes to baseball games, he goes to the soccer games. He is part of that Seattle community, and I really hate it when teams can't get their star players to stay with their teams for years and years and years, because I think all Russell Wilson said is, I need some help on the offensive line, and the offensive line was probably looking around going, yeah, we need some help. And it's a no-brainer. The guy's running for his life all week, and Seattle should be a dominant team in the NFC West, although that's a much more competitive division. But he's part of that city, and I think he may not be there.
Yeah, Russell Wilson, it's reminding me a lot of J.J. Watt. I mean, people cared less about the fact that he was just leaving the Texans, but that he was leaving the city of Houston. I mean, like you mentioned with Russell, he's on the sideline of the Rockets games, and he, when his wife was playing soccer in Houston, was always at her games, and he just was a man of the town and a man of the people and really cared for that city. I don't think that care goes away, but certainly his priorities are now in Arizona, and Seattle would really hate to see not just Russell go, but their franchise quarterback go, because he is the glue to that team right now.
Yeah, I think there's players that are iconic with their cities, and go back to what J.J. Watt did during the hurricane a few years ago to help the city and get relief there. And I look at you always want your star player to finish their career. I mean, even Emmitt Smith, he had a cup of coffee in Arizona, but his career was done by the time he went there. That's fine. Joe Montana, the same thing in Kansas City. He's a 49er forever. But I don't like it when they get to a point where they get in these arguments with their coaches or their GMs, and everybody's trying to make sure they stay in their own lane. And you're the quarterback; you don't decide who your teammates are. He's Russell Wilson. He should have us a little bit of a say in how the roster shakes out. And I have no issue with what he said or how he's gone about it, because I think he wants to bring a Super Bowl to Seattle, and Seattle's been great for him, and he's been part of that city. So hopefully they can work it out, although it looks like that may not be possible.
Yeah, the NFL, specifically their quarterbacks, right, where they are almost like another GM in some instances, because their voices are heard and heard loudly across those organizations. They're trying to be more like the NBA in that it's a player-led league. They're the ones on the floor. They're the ones that are out there putting in the work and seeing the opposing teams for what they are, rather than just on the TV screen later in the week. So certainly these quarterbacks we're seeing again with Deshaun Watson, same issue that's up there in Seattle with Russell Wilson is having, where he doesn't feel like his voice is being heard. He's not getting the players he needs, and truthfully, he's not. Neither of them are asking for much. At the end of the day, they're asking for what most quarterbacks get at the bare minimum without even asking for it.
Well,
and that's where that contingent comes in.
I look at the Deshaun Watson thing is it's the Houston Texans have painted themselves into a corner with the draft lack of draft picks and the salary cap issues as, okay, we're going to be 2 to 3 years before we can win now. And Deshaun Watson's like, come on, figure this out. And then not that they hired a bad coach in Houston, but they didn't hire a name coach. And I think a lot of times when players have never heard of the person that you're going to bring in to coach them, they're a little bit skeptical as to whether or not that's the right person or not. And so on the periphery, it looks like Houston is building for the next coach in 2 or 3 years down the road. And a player of Deshaun Watson's ilk is like, I want to play now. I want to win now. And it doesn't look like you're doing anything to help me get there. So if that's the way you want to run your organization, then I'm going to go somewhere else. And I look at the same thing when it comes to managers and general managers that constantly get fired. The New York Jets come to mind in the NFL. There's teams in professional sports all the time that have more interest in making money than they do winning, and yet they paint this picture to their fans. Oh, we're all about trying to make it to the Super Bowl, but they really never do anything to get there. The Clippers were in that boat for years until they finally started moving around in the NBA, and obviously when they had the ownership change, that they became almost as a good a team, and sometimes a better team than the dominant team, the Lakers. But it really pains me when I see you take the Detroit Lions. Matt Patricia is not a bad coach, but you would think he is just by his track record with the Detroit Lions. But the Detroit Lions are one of 2 teams that have never been to the Super Bowl in the history of the Super Bowl. So they've been going at this for 55 years, and they still do nothing to make themselves competitive when it comes to the postseason. And yet then they blame the general manager and the coach when things don't work out. So I think there's a fine line. I think you have to have great owners in order to have great teams. And while Jerry Jones, I think, will go down in history as one of the greatest owners from a business standpoint, we all have wished for 25 years he would have let somebody with football knowledge run the football side of things.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of comments on our poll question here about the Cowboys needing a new GM, needing a new owner. The plan with Jerry Jones is that there is no plan, which is part of the reason they got stuck in this Dak Prescott situation to begin with. They finally get that deal put on the table and done so we can move on from the speculation that is, what are we going to do with Dak Prescott? The franchise tag? Is he going to walk the next year? Are we going to be in search of another quarterback? You know, he was paid pennies in comparison to what he will be making in the future for the Dallas Cowboys. He was obviously a steal coming out of the 4th round of that draft. But I think it looks good for the Cowboys. I think he is a great quarterback on and off the field, which is important, right? Dwayne Haskins in Washington, that only lasted like a flash, it felt like. And a lot of that was his inability to lead and be a good player off the field, right? Not being a professional, because it's not just about what you do in between the lines. It's about all the other aspects that come with being a franchise quarterback. So very happy for the Cowboys. Again, you can vote on our poll question today at Ticket 760 and AM 1300 The Zone. And as always, we are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube if you'd like to see our pretty mugs this morning. Everyone's flight. See Sam here. He's wearing one of his lovely hats. We're big hat people here on the radio. I'm without hat today. I'm having a good ponytail hair day, so I'm just rocking the basic pony. And of course, other news we'll get in today. Tiger with Andy. He's got some great stories. We'll get an update on where Tiger is. Of course, he texted Bryson DeChambeau over the weekend. Invitational and an update on the Les Miles Kansas situation. We'll get into that and so much more. Thank you so much for listening this morning. It's the Chris Duel Show on AM 1300 The Zone and Ticket 760.
Clint, I do love my Cowboys as much as I love the Horns. I just don't live in Dallas, so I don't get as many chances to showcase it.
Right.
Is there an echo, Anthony? I'm not hearing it in my ears. Andy, are you good if we do less here and then move into Tiger?
Sure, yeah.
Because I really like the questions you brought up about us kind of tearing down celebs and stars. And
Right.
I didn't know that you mentioned he was naive. I don't know much about early Tiger, just didn't really pay attention to golf back then. But it really does remind me of the Britney Spears documentary that came out and the control people have over those kind of people's lives.
Well, the agents kind of take over their lives, and athletes don't pay their bills. Somebody else does it for them. Mm-hmm. Athletes, some do, but the stars don't. Mm-hmm. They say, I want this house. How much does it cost? I mean, they never see the money leave or come into their bank account. Somebody tells them at the end of the month, this is how much you got left. And a lot of times they tell their agents to put them on an allowance so they don't go crazy and go overboard with stuff. But or they only spend what they earn, and all their endorsement money goes into savings. Some do it that way, but when the electric bill and the water bill and all that stuff comes, that's just direct deposit out of their accounts. And it all started when IMG was formed in the late 50s, early 60s with Martin McCormick and Arnold Palmer, because Martin McCormick thought Arnold Palmer was spending way too much time doing things like that and not spending time either with his family or practicing. And so he was the forefather of what the sports agency business became. And they just take a fee from what they do and do everything for the athlete. And sometimes the athlete doesn't even know what he. A lot of times people criticize Tiger for not tipping at a restaurant, or when he was training with the Navy SEALs, not buying them lunch. Well, no one ever told him that was the expectation, that he should do that.
It was this thing, because you mentioned Arnold Palmer. I guess this was before electronic payments.
Yeah.
Right, because I do everything electronic. I still check in and make sure I wasn't overcharged, this, that, and the other. As far as the payment, it's
easier now for agents to do it because you can auto draft everything. But in 1960, Arnold Palmer would sit down at the kitchen table for an hour and start paying his bills. And Martin McCormick was like, "What are you doing? You got to be on the range, or you need to be out with the wife and the kids. You got more important things to do than pay your bills. I'll do it. Go home." And the bills stopped coming to Arnold Palmer. They went to Martin McCormick, and he did everything. And that's how the sports agency business got started.
I've always wondered that too, with celebs that have multiple houses.
Mm-hmm.
Where does their mail go? Who's getting it? How do they trust people? How many phones do they have?
Well, that's what happens sometimes when an athlete gets taken to the cleaners, because they're not paying attention to all the different people they're letting manage them.
Yeah,
it's really important. And that's one of the things with Tiger. He only has one guy, and everything goes through Mark Steinberg. And Mark Steinberg's a PR guy. I think during the scandal in 2009 and 10, if Earl would have still been alive, they would have handled that much differently. But that's the way Mark Steinberg wanted to handle it, so that's how they did it. But the story I'll tell is a really quick one about when he was in San Antonio. The one time he came to the Texas Open and his credit cards didn't work.
Ugh. That's always my worst nightmare. Like the new chip thing. Some places it's instant, and others I'm just sitting there waiting for it to say approved.
Yeah.
Hey, Sam, are you training someone? Song always reminds me of Big Fat Liar. One of my favorites growing up.
This is a good 80s song.
Isn't it?
It is.
I love me some Duran Duran.
I pretty much like anything that was played between like 81 and about 88. After that, the music died for me for about 25 years until my kids got to a level to where I started listening to what they listened to, and that's when I became a Katy Perry fan.
There you go. See, I'm trying to, now that I'm with Chris, because we're trying to just meld together, because I enjoy his music and I'd like him to enjoy a little bit of mine. Because obviously I've got parents, so I've listened to what they listened to growing up when I didn't have control of the radio dial, but now I drive my own car and can listen to my own tunes.
See, I had control of the radio dial until my kids were teenagers, and they were like, "Dad, you listen to enough sports today, so we're changing the channel." And that's when I got into, that would be like the pop music from say 06 to 14 in that range.
Oh yeah, that's when the aux cord became a thing, where you could plug your phone in.
Yes, exactly.
Before the Bluetooth.
And
yeah, give me the aux.
So a few years ago, when Katy Perry came to town, they took me to the concert. I did not take them. So just so you know.
Oh, okay, that's fair. What was it like her big popular Teenage Dream tour?
It was right after Roar, because Roar was her song.
So this was close to her Super Bowl performance.
Yes, right after.
Okay, perfect.
Right after,
so that's really
like
when you
after.
Became the big fan.
Absolutely.
You were like, she can entertain an NFL crowd. I think Sam was laughing at us, but that's okay. We know he's the music savant here out of all of us.
I still think that's the best halftime show, but I am biased a little bit.
I mean, it was crazy that she came out on a giant tiger. I've never seen anything like it.
That was cool.
And after this last year, it's pretty unremarkable, I think. I mean, I don't know if that's partly COVID or just because The Weeknd is a singer and not a performer.
Yeah, I got nothing out of this year's Super Bowl, and I don't get a lot out of a lot of them. But I remember I was at a Super Bowl party when that one was going on, so everybody was like, "Okay, shush, Andy wants to listen to the halftime show." That was whenever that was. It was at 18.
You're that guy.
Yeah,
you're that guy. All right, well that's cool. Now, someone who had 5 players in the Super Bowl this year, Mr. Les Miles, and he's in the news today. He's been in the news, was in the news over the weekend for a 2013 allegation against him for sexual harassment while he was at LSU. It's popped back up. Kansas immediately put him on leave so they could do their own investigation. And late last night, it came down that they had mutually decided to part ways. A statement from the KD athletic director as well as Les Miles came out. Your thoughts, Mr. Everett?
Well, I think the most important thing is that coaches around the country have got to start having some serious discussion with their athletes when they show up on campus. And UTSA has a deal called Set the Expectation. A lot of the athletes wear the shirt called Set the Expectation. It comes from a lady named Brenda Tracy, who goes around the country to tell her story of sexual violence and sexual harassment and gang rape when she was a student at Oregon State back in the late 90s. And she goes and speaks to a lot of these student athletes, male student athletes across the country, and has many of them in tears afterwards, and reminds them, hey, when you're with women, you're with somebody's mother, you're with somebody's daughter or niece or somebody that's important in somebody else's life. And they're a human being just like you are. And they need to be treated with respect and dignity and not for your pleasure. And so UTSA is the only school that has implemented a policy that says if you are found guilty of, or if you plead guilty or no contest to something of that nature, your playing career is done. You're not going to be a student athlete there. And I think the other 100 or 300 and however many there are need to implement a very similar rule that your performance and your ability to play or your ability to coach or your ability to be employed by the university or to be a student at the university has to come back to your behavior. And just as important as it is for a student athlete to graduate and to be on pace to graduate with the API scores and all those things, how you behave is incredibly important. I have 4 daughters, and I some of them have already gone to college, and some are going to go to college at some point, and I want them to be safe and feel comfortable in the environment that they're in. But if the football team is going to be allowed to do rogue whatever they do, as long as they keep winning, that's not acceptable in anybody's world. And the thing I applaud about Kansas and Les Miles is that if you'd have gone back in a time machine 5 years ago and this would have happened, well, that happened at LSU. It's not our concern. Go coach. And now it's going to follow you wherever you go. And to me, that's good. And I doubt Les Miles will coach again unless he can prove that he had nothing to do with this. And this may fall into the same category that Art Briles was in.
Mm-hmm.
Art Briles turned a blind eye and a deaf ear because they were winning, and so did a lot of the people around the Baylor program. They didn't want to go back to losing, and he was making them the 3rd best team in the country instead of the worst team in the Big 12. And that was more important than the safety of some of the students.
And Kansas claimed they vetted Les Miles and saw no red flags that popped up prior to them hiring. I want to read you the director of athletics, Jeff Long's statement that he put out last night. I am extremely disappointed for our university, fans, and everyone involved with our football program. There's a lot of young talent on this football team, and I have no doubt we will identify the right individual to lead this program. We will begin the search for a new head coach immediately with an outside firm to assist in this process. We need to win football games, and that is exactly what we're going to do. Now, I hate this. You didn't address the problem. You said we're parting ways. You didn't address the problem, though. Everyone already knows what the problem is, so I'm not saying you need to address it so people are aware. You need to address it because you need to show ownership that you did wrong in hiring Les in the first place with this information available, that you don't condone this behavior, because this statement to me reads, well, wins are more important, and he only won 3 games. Well, that wasn't the problem, because if that was the problem, he would have been fired after this season. But he was bringing players in. They were, better players than they've had in the past. They've really stepped up their social media game. Everyone's at least paying attention to the football program in ways that they weren't prior. But like we talked about Dak Prescott being the franchise quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, all eyes are on him. When you are a head football coach at a big-time university, even if you're Kansas and you're not known for your football, you're known for your basketball. If you're the Bill Selfs or the Les Miles of that campus, you are the franchise tag of that campus. You are the man on campus. And it's not just about the players you recruit to that team. It's about the kids that come to that school for anything, sports, computer science, anything. And like you said, people aren't going to want to send their daughters to a campus where the man on campus is treating women so disrespectfully. We're not asking you to be the guy that holds the door open. We're asking you to do the bare minimum here.
Absolutely.
Be a good human.
The thing about it is you go back to Baylor pre-Art Briles, and Baylor was 0 and whatever. And I guarantee you there's people that support that university in Austin and in Waco and in Dallas, and they would go to their country clubs and they would be the ridicule of them because they always lost, and they always lost by a lot. And I think there was this idea, hey, we got to get good. I'm sick and tired of being the loser in this group of my friends. And they went out and hired Art Briles. And if you're at Baylor and you're recruiting against Oklahoma and Texas and A&M, you may take a chance on a marginal player. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't take chances on players who have a checkered background, but especially unless it's sexual or domestic violence. And I think that you always want to give a child an opportunity to change their life and change their ways. And but you have to make sure that the most important thing is their behavior when they get on campus. If you're LSU, you don't have to ever go after a marginal athlete. The only school you're competing against for players is Alabama. You don't ever have, and if you look at the players at Texas, for the most part, there's always going to be a bad apple in the barrel somewhere along the way. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the players that Texas has recruited, that Oklahoma's recruited, A&M, Alabama, the marquee schools in the country, they're very seldom do you have a player. And if you do have a player that is like this, you can usually get rid of them pretty quickly because they're not very good and they're disrupting your team and a lot of other reasons. You're easily able to get rid of them. But if you're at Kansas and if you're at at Baylor and you're trying to become them, sometimes you have to take a chance on a player that doesn't necessarily have great grades or may have a criminal background. And you're hoping that he'll do well for me. He'll change for me. I'm going to make him a better person by his experience on campus. And sometimes you hit a home run with that, and sometimes you fail miserably. And so I don't understand why LSU was recruiting any player that would come in thinking of that nature. And and I think the one thing that every student athlete needs to have happen, or student for that matter, when they show up on a campus, is to have an indoctrination of what is expected of you and what your behavior is to be expected of. Kansas is tired of losing football games. Guess what? They're going to lose a lot more for a long time because they're Kansas and they're not playing basketball. But you could be respectable at 6-6, but you can't do it if you're going to have a bunch of athletes that are going to be basically running around your campus as criminals and doing whatever you want. Not that that was happening at Kansas, but apparently it was at LSU because, hey, we're winning. Who cares what you? And that attitude and that behavior is no longer acceptable. And thank goodness for that, because we've got to get a student body and a community at a campus where everybody feels safe.
Yes, and this firing happening, an agreement to part ways is what they've said it was in Les Miles' statement as well. He said it's not a great day for my family, but he knows that KU football is in a better place than when he left it. I don't know that I would agree with that. Especially considering how he left it. Again, we're just asking you to do the bare minimum. And you talk about second chances and bringing these kids into these schools where, maybe they have a checkered background in some regard, but that, they get second chances. They go to school. I think of Joshua Moore at Texas, right? He got I believe it was a weapons charge against him. He sat out for a year. He came back, had a wonderful year for Texas, had an impact on the community with the marches over the summer, and really just turned a corner. But when you're talking about coaches and coaches who are making millions of dollars and are in a great position of power, not just for their programs, but for university, and we're asking you to do the bare minimum, which is be a good human, and you can't do that, you don't deserve that second chance. There are plenty of other people who are deserving of that role and that title and that opportunity to prove what they can do. Just because you won a championship in the past, just because you've been a coach at a big name school at the past, does not give you the right to get a quote unquote earned second chance, because you haven't done anything to earn it. If anything, you've just pushed this to the side, pushed it to the background, and now it's popped out. Happened to be on International Women's Day and Women's Month. He tweeted earlier in February his excitement about the 13 women who worked for the Kansas football program on Women in Sports Day, and all that just seems really ironic now, knowing why he is leaving the campus there at KU.
About 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, high school coaches and junior high coaches started getting the message to their players: listen, if you want to play college sports, you got to get your grades up. Your academic success is just as important as your football success. Otherwise, you're going to be a non-qualifier and you may never play at a school. You have to go to junior college. So starting in 8th grade, starting in 9th grade, starting maybe in 1st grade, pay attention to your academics. You may be the hotshot football player or basketball player, but if you can't at least make a C average, you're not playing sports. And so if you look at a lot of the players in the last 10 years, that they come in ready to go to college. Some of them even show up early before they're, a lot of the recruiting classes are already in school this year to get a head start on their grades. And that's important. And I think we need to go back to the junior highs and the high schools and start this grassroots program that says, listen, your behavior is just as important as your grades and your athletic ability. You may be the best player in the world, but if you're going to be someone that's going to become a criminal and sexually assault people or sexually harass people, you're not playing ever. Not at high school, not at college, not in the pros, ever. You can be the best player out there, but you're going to be playing in a rec league somewhere because you're not playing in organized sports. And start to get to these kids very, very early when they're still in their formative years, that whatever behavior they're thinking about is possibly not acceptable.
Yeah, because you're coming to an institution and you're wearing that Texas or whatever on your chest. You're no longer just representing yourself. You're representing a university. It's a different amount of discipline that you need to hold for yourself, not just for your athletic career, not just for your collegiate career, but for your personal life. Because as we know, a very small percentage of student athletes make it to that next level. and they need jobs, and they need to go into the world, like I said, being good humans in whatever they do. And it's such a bare minimum to ask. I hate that we keep having these stories, but love that we are seeing swifter action being taken as far as punishment and results of consequences that happen due to your actions. And I, like you mentioned, I don't know that Les Miles finds another job. However, we do know Art Briles has found a handful of jobs since he's left Baylor. So someone may be
He's
willing.
not back at the college level.
Right. But someone somewhere out there may be willing to say, hey, let's bring this guy in.
Well, Brenda Tracy, who I mentioned before, who goes around to different colleges and talks to the athletes, and I've had done interviews with her that we've run on UTSA broadcasts and other places. And one of the things she says is, we're going to the men because the men are what can change it. And it's coaches and it's other student athletes and it's other men that can change the behavior. She said, if women could have fixed this, we'd have done it a long time ago. But if you take a group of 100 people, 90 of them are never going to go down this road, but they sometimes turn their back on the 10 that will. And it's up to those 90 to put those other 10 in line and say, listen, this is the accepted behavior, or get out. And that's I think is very powerful. And it is up to men to be able to teach other men about how they need to respect people, and especially respect the women on the campus that they're around. Because right now we're in a COVID year where there's not a lot of people on campus. That's irrelevant. But as we start to go back into having more and more of this, the behaviors that you're going to see on campus is there's always going to be somebody that does something they're not supposed to do. But if the 90% can help the 10% not do it, then we're going to have a lot less of it.
Yeah, don't be the person who's holding your phone and recording the fight. Be proactive and do what you can to stop the issue, or get someone you can. I always question the people that are behind the phone. Like, is this a setup? Are you part of it? Because what are you really doing to help the situation? If anything, you are escalating it. Kansas now in search of a new head coach for that football program, as springtime just around the corner. So they of course have an interim head coach with their assistant, but they want a guy. They thought they had him in Les Miles, big name guy who could bring great recruits to Kansas and really bring that program to better relevancy. Sam, I see you just pulled your mic down. Do you have a comment on the Les Miles situation? Okay, that's fair. Well, I appreciate your producing skills for helping me out with that as I navigate my first week driving the Chris Duel Show. We appreciate you so much for listening here on AM 1300 The Zone and Ticket 760. Again, we are streaming live on both Facebook pages and YouTube. Make sure you head over to our Twitters to vote in that Dak Prescott poll question asking what you think the chances are for the Cowboys to get to the Super Bowl. We will get to Tiger Woods next with Andy Everett, who joins me this morning. Again, this is the Chris Duel Show on Ticket 760 and AM 1300, The Zone.
Okay.
morning, Alan. Everyone else on Facebook Live, YouTube. Laura, good morning. Hi, Paige. Leo Chris is in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Yes. Saw those pictures.
Yeah, I've got you, Sam. At 7:30? Yes, sir. The Chris Duel Show, 7 o'clock hour. My name is Shannon Salty Sweeney. Mr. Duel currently in Santa Fe, New Mexico, enjoying some vacation time. So with me today is Ticket 760 Zone Andy Everett from Frisco, no less. So we've got Sam in San Antonio, Andy in Frisco, myself in Austin. As always, we've got our poll question of the day up at Ticket 760 and AM 1300, the Zone's Twitter page, asking you what percentage you give the Dallas Cowboys to make the Super Bowl within the next 4 years after Dak signs his huge contract. Finally get him not locked down for the Cowboys. Currently, 60% believe there's just a 25% chance that the Cowboys will make it to the Super Bowl. That makes me a little sad. I'm in the 51-75% range just because I think they have an easier way to the playoffs given their lackluster NFC East division. But we'll see. Some more votes are trickling in that are going greater than the 25%. Andy, you said you were with me on this one.
Yeah, I think the pessimism comes from still who's in charge. It's Jerry's world, and Jerry has had a track record for 25 years of it that's not very good. And so I think there's probably some pessimistic fans that are saying, well, let's see if we can win in spite of him. And maybe that'll be the case. But I think they're the best team now in the NFC East, mainly because the other teams are terrible. And we'll see if they can win that, then you're going to potentially get a home field playoff game and maybe get all your ducks in a row by the time you get to late January and sneak in there.
Dak Prescott's new deal, 4 years worth up to $164 million. That is a lot of cash compared to the pennies he was making.
He's not hurting.
Past several years, to go along with his 11 endorsement deals that make him about $50 million a year. On top of that, it's good to be Dak Prescott on this Taco Tuesday. But while we've got Andy here, we have to talk some Tiger Woods. Tiger still recovering from that horrific crash just a couple weeks ago now, where he was driving and basically the front of his car completely totaled. Glad he's still here with us. The question remains if he'll ever play golf again, but most just hoping that he can get back to as much of a normal life as he can so we can be there for his family. Golf comes second in this case, but he did text Bryson DeChambeau apparently over the weekend. Bryson name dropped that really quickly when he was accepting that Arnold Palmer trophy over the weekend. That Tiger wished him well and said to do it for Arnold for this one. Your thoughts on this tournament and Bryson and Tiger and all of it?
Well, Bryson's certainly the guy to watch. I don't know if he's coming to the Valero Texas Open. I would imagine he'll be at the match play in Austin because it's a World Golf Championship event. And there's some holes out on the golf course out in at Austin Country Club. That'll be fun to see how Bryson attacks if he tries to hit driver on those holes or not. And I think it's great for the game. Now, I don't care how far he hits it. He still has to get in the hole. And there was one hole where he outdrove Lee Westwood by 250 yards, and they both made 4. So it's still a matter of who gets it in the hole first. The reason I put the Tiger Woods stuff on our list, on our topic list, is since his accident, I've read so many different stories, and then usually after their stories, there's a lot of blog posts and opinions about what happened or what's going to happen. And there's some that are nice and, hey, we hope he recovers, hope he plays golf again, all those things. But there's so many people that are negative about, well, he was on drugs. He had to be doing something. Nobody just drives off the road. Hey, I've almost fallen asleep before driving, and fortunately I haven't. And I get out and go get something to eat and drink and walk around a little while or take a 10-minute cat nap and then move on with my day. And it's kind of a scary situation when you've driven like 3 miles and don't remember the last 3 miles you drove. But I think that the thing that amazes me is how we tear down the athletes that have entertained us so much. And I don't care whether you're a Tiger Woods fan or not, or a Tom Brady fan or not, what they've done is remarkable. And if you haven't been entertained by that in some way, even if you were entertained negatively where you were rooting against the guy,
at least you were entertained.
At least you were.
And now you want to tear these guys down. They're human after all. They're going to have human fallacies. They're going to make mistakes. And they live
they're going to have human fallacies. They're going to make mistakes. And they live in a much different world than you and I do. They get to do things that they never will. Their lifestyles are vastly different. And a lot of people criticize their character or their behavior. An athlete or an entertainer, for most of us, 99% of us, we're not inviting them to dinner. They're not our next door neighbor. We don't hang out with them on the weekends. We don't have a relationship with them other than what they provide us through the entertainment that they bring us, whether it's sports or movies or music or whatever. They provide us something that is positive in our lives and even negative sometimes. And you feed off the negative energy if you don't like that particular entertainer or performer. But I just don't understand why people want to tear down athletes and entertainers that have done so much for, I'll say, you and for me and for all of us. I mean, what would the not just the golf world, but what would the sports world be like without what Tiger has done for the last 25 years?
Yeah, his impact globally has been tremendous, like you said, not just for golf, but for sports and for Black athletes as well. And he continues to have an impact, and I think he will, even when he does retire or step away from his professional playing career, which is, super exciting. Just thinking about what Kobe had done in the short time since his retirement, he was really making and continuing to make an impact, and in ways he still is even after his death. And luckily, Tiger is still around with us. But I totally agree with you, and I don't, my millennial is going to be showing here because I'm going to bring up Britney Spears. The recent Hulu documentary that kind of talked about everything behind the scenes in her life, the people that were assisting her, but in reality were stealing money or putting her in situations she didn't really need to be in because it made them more money. It, was to quote unquote boost her career, help her status. People talked, oh, she over sexualized her. Well, she's not sexy enough. This, that, and the other. It's overprotected in some aspects and then not protected in others. And now we're living in this social media era where Tiger is in, but he didn't come up in it. And in turn, it makes sports fans and fans of these celebrities feel in some way like they're owed. They're owed more than what they see on the course, what they see in concert. They want all those behind the scenes. And then when they get something, that's not enough. They want more. Or they criticize whoever it is for, showing off their luxury lifestyle or, being fake, this, that, and the other. It's a can't-win situation. But like you said, we're not neighbors with them. We don't know them personally. We're lucky that we get to see them as athletes and as performers when they are doing their thing. And then you throw in the paparazzi and the social media, and now it's a whole new ball game that they're having to navigate. And no one is born ready and willing to navigate that kind of lifestyle. It is go as you may and deal with it. And when it comes at you, and there's no way to prepare you for that. And they do get scrutinized. They do, the Ambien thing with Tiger is a huge story right now when there's nothing to prove that he was under the influence. He was going to a video shoot with Drew Brees early in the morning. The likelihood of that taking place is so slim. And I would go ahead and say inaccurate for that to even be talked about. I mean, it's the definition of clickbait for me, because I hate that we immediately, like you said, we go to drag these people down just because they're in a position of power. And for whatever reason, as much as we like to build people up, the second they reach that mountaintop, we want to see them not walk down, but be pushed down and slide down in dramatic fashion and
fall down without a parachute, basically.
Yeah, and hit the bottom as hard as they can. Because then on the other side of that, we love to see a comeback story.
Mm-hmm.
But the media and fans are the ones that ultimately are the driving force behind these.
Well, it's kind of funny. There's a story that back in the 80s, when Larry Bird was in Boston, Larry Bird mowed his own yard. And people would stop on the street and watch Larry Bird mow his yard. And Larry Bird did not live in a gated community. And he didn't really like Boston because it was cold and it was cosmopolitan and a big city, and he wanted to be back home in Indiana. But he thought it was amazing that he wasn't allowed to mow his yard without an audience. And the reason that star athletes and entertainers live in huge houses and gated communities
is so they can have some semblance of privacy,
so they can
not have their entire lives made public. When Arnold Palmer was first starting to play golf, in the late
50s and early 60s, Mark McCormick, basically the founding father of the sports agency business, told Arnold he was spending too much time paying his bills and not enough time with his family and practicing golf. And so he took that away from him, and that's how the sports agency business got to where it is.
And a lot of
athletes,
they don't know what
to do when something comes up, because somebody's always handled it for them. If you're Britney Spears, your job is to go sing and get better at singing. And if you're Tiger Woods, your job is to go to the gym and to the golf course and get better at golf. And the stuff that you and I do on a regular basis is not in their wheelhouse because they don't have time for it. So it reminds me of a story that kind of shows you how simple things would be for us, but how overlooked and naive these athletes are when they first come into their craft. And it happened in San Antonio in 1996. Butch Harmon told this story at La Cantera about 10, 15 years ago at an event that I was at. And Butch was Tiger's first coach. And Tiger was
the U.S. Amateur in August.
He went on the tour of 1996.
And in October, he's in San Antonio for the Valero Texas Open, late September,
whenever it was.
And
Butch says, I'm going to come to San Antonio. I want to see your swing. We need to work and make sure you're doing the right stuff. And they hadn't seen each other in 3 or 4 weeks. So I'll meet you in San Antonio at the golf course on Tuesday. And they go to the golf course and they work on a few things on the range. And Tiger was staying at a person's house. A lot of times athletes will either rent an entire house or just live in the guest quarters of this person's house. And this is the situation that they have. And when a golfer shows up in an event, usually right before they get there or right after they're there, a FedEx package comes, and that package has maybe 30, 40 shirts in it and 10, 15 pairs of golf slacks that they're going to wear for the week. And in the case of Tiger or Rory McIlroy or the star players, they're told by their manufacturer, this is what we want you to wear on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And they have multiple
copies of each of those shirts in case one gets something spilled on it or somebody Sharpie marks on it or whatever. So they can always have
a fresh look. They never wear the same shirt twice. They probably don't wear the same pair of pants more than a few times. They always have a different golf glove, a new hat, all that kind of stuff, which is provided for them. And when they leave, they just leave it with their guest or with somebody at the hotel and say, give it to your friends. There'll be another package when I get to the next tournament. So as this story goes, Butch shows up. They go to this person's house, and Butch says, we're going to dinner tonight. This is when Tiger actually could go out without being completely chaotic. And Tiger comes down ready to go, and he's wearing his golf slacks and his golf shirt. And Butch Harmon says, don't you have any going out clothes? Don't you have some jeans? Don't you have some khakis? Don't you have a button-down shirt? Tiger goes, no, this is all I got. This is what Nike said. This is what I'm wearing all week. We're going to the store. So the two of them hop in the courtesy car and go to North Star Mall. And they get to North Star Mall, go to Dillard's, and they buy $800 worth of clothes. And they go to pay, and none of Tiger's credit cards will work. He swipes 5 credit cards. They all come back declined. So Butch Harmon pulls out his credit card and has to pay for Tiger's clothes, which he said at the time, I still haven't gotten reimbursed
for that.
Oh, no.
But
for that.
So
$800 bill. So they're walking to the car, and Tiger goes, man, they sent me these cards FedEx the other day when I was in whatever city I was in before. I don't know why they don't work. And Butch said, did you activate it? And Tiger's like, what's that?
There was a little
strip on the front of that card that said, call this number to activate your card. And Tiger's I didn't know what that was. I just ripped it off and threw it in the trash.
So here's
the Stanford educated straight A student in high school, world greatest golfer at 20 years old, didn't know you have to activate your credit cards before they work. And it's something as simple as what we do like that on an everyday basis. It was somebody didn't handle that for him and show him, hey, you need to call this number and verify who you are, so your credit cards will work. So that's kind of the world that they live in. It's a world that we don't live in, and it kind of shows you that, you know, when they do get to drive their own car, that's a pretty big deal for them because usually somebody's driving for them. I think that I just wish we would see a lot less of tearing down the athletes that have given us so much entertainment throughout the years. We're always trying to get more from them than we deserve. They are human. They do deserve some kind of private life, but they live in a glass house and a camera follows them wherever they go usually.
That is a wonderful story because I just imagine I can't imagine what Tiger Woods' reaction is. Is he? I mean, you said he's not as notable at that time, right? He's not getting mobbed in the ways he was. But does that person not realize he's Tiger Woods? Not that they can do anything. The card's not activated, but they're not like he looks like he'd probably be good for it. You know, like he's got all the Nike on anyway. I wonder if he was wearing his signature red.
I'm sure the clerk at Dillard's is like, I know you can afford this, but right now I can't let you walk out the store with this stuff.
Because I've had my card declined once, and it was a chip card, and the chip was malfunctioned because I had just paid something for something earlier in the day, and I had to like take it out and use it a couple times. But the embarrassment that flushed through my body and still remains to this day, I don't know that I can go back to that specific Target for a while. Because I had to use a debit card, which for me, that's almost like spending money because it's immediately taken out of your account versus a credit card. That doesn't come out of my account for a while. So that embarrassment, I couldn't even. I don't even know what I would do. Immediately call my dad.
Yeah. Sam and I have had this conversation way before. I am not a cashless person. I like cash.
Oh, yes.
I like to spend cash because then I know it's gone and I don't have to worry about a bill coming. And obviously, there's things I charge, but I'm not going to go to Starbucks and spend $3 and put it on a card. That's not my wheelhouse. And so many people, here's my card, and then all of a sudden the bills come and you had 17 lattes that month for $100, and you're wondering where your money went. So I like to if I things like that, lunch, a snack at the drive-through or whatever, I'm paying cash because I'm not going to spend it if I don't have it, and I know that I have it, and I know I can spend it.
Right. And especially like you mentioned, drive-throughs where I like to spend cash the most because I do every now and again. A grandparent sends you $10-20 for whatever random holiday. It's great. It's awesome. But it's not something that you can go deposit into your checking account because it's $10-20. So next time I go to dinner, I'll use it. But now we're in these COVID times, and half the places I go, they're like, please, if you have a credit card, use a credit card and not cash. I'm like, do you want my money or not? Because I need to get rid of this because A, it's taking up space. And also this, I want to eat here, but I don't want to pay for it, if that makes sense. If I use this cash, it's like I didn't actually buy anything. It's free. So let me use this cash. I'm a big Dunkin' girl, and people on who specifically those who watch our feed know this because I typically have a Dunkin' Donuts coffee with me at least every other day, and I use their gift cards and put it on my app. So to me, it's like I'm not paying for it. So I think what you just said, I think I'm going to go to Target and with the cash I currently have in my wallet, just buy Dunkin' gift cards and then put them. So then it's like I'm using cash. This has been a very helpful segment for me. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And great insight into the man that is Tiger Woods. And that's hilarious because how much money do you think he's worth these days?
Oh, $500 million at least.
So a little $800 trip to Dillard's in San Antonio, his cards get declined. And again, because he was naive, he didn't know any better. And again, it's the people you involve around yourself, right? We grow up with our parents telling us, have a good friend group. If they jump off a cliff, would you do it too?
When you sign a $40 million contract, you have lots of friends pretty quickly.
Right.
You didn't even know you had.
It becomes even more important to see who you surround yourself with, because especially when the media and fans are coming at you for whatever you did that day that they're not happy about, even if it's something ridiculous, you need those people to rely on and to fall back on, and people who won't take advantage of you. So I'm hoping. Go ahead.
You have to have really thick skin when you're an athlete. Understand there's going to be criticism. Understand that that everybody's going to be kind of against you at some point. There's always going to be the apologists like me that will look the other way. Now, what Tiger did in 2009 is behavior that I don't think is acceptable. But he eventually owned up to it, and he's moved on from it. But
you're not in his shoes. And again, he's not my best friend. I don't have his number in my phone, although a lot of people think I might.
And again, he's not in my phone. A lot of people think I might. I've asked him 2 questions.
It's Eldrick, yeah.
It's Eldrick. I've been around him twice. I was in the Flash area in 2019 at the World Match Play up in Austin when he finished his Wednesday round. And I was around him at the Texas Open in 1996 when he was doing all the stuff he was doing here. But the man has entertained me to the point in the last 25 years more than probably all other athletes in my life combined. And the last thing I'm going to do is criticize the way he behaves, as long as it's not criminal behavior, and the way he lives his life. If he's a criminal, that's going to be decided by criminal courts and things like that. And to my knowledge, he's not in that category, although the DUI could be considered a criminal offense. And
thank goodness he didn't hurt somebody in that a few years ago. But we've got to. I want to see him
come back. I want to see him make another miracle run and win another golf tournament, because that's my relationship with him. Is he wins, and I like watching him win.
In the words of one of my favorite MTV shows, MTV Diaries, you think you know me, but you have no idea. Thank you so much, Andy, for that insight on Tiger. We will move into sports history and sports birthdays, as well as the Salty Shakedown coming up in the next segment. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is the Chris Duel Show on Ticket 716 AM 1300 The Zone.
One shot, do not miss your chance to blow. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime. You better lose yourself.
So, Andy, I've got all these written down, so I'll just rattle them off.
Okay.
And, if you have any quip or anything you want to mention, feel free. And then I sent you an email with my shakedown topics.
Yeah, Tom Brady, NFL jerseys, and Bob Stoops.
Yeah, and then those the jerseys are the Bengals, and then the Browns and 49ers, I believe.
Okay. Ba-bum, bum, bum, bum.
Carl, if we don't talk about the Cowboys going to the Super Bowl, then we're not Cowboys fans. That's what we do. Every year is our year. Sam, is this true? This guy said you have a friend that has a Super Bowl tattoo, championship from 2015. That you have a buddy. All right.
Yeah. Hey, I work hard every day. I work hard.
This is my theme song. So I think I work hard every day. I work hard at talking sports. That's what I like to do. So I'm very lucky to be in this position I am, and lucky to that Andy Everett stepped in to join me this week with Chris Duel on vacation. Biggest Puma in San Antonio holding us down, playing the jams. Are you a Logic fan, Andy? Do you know who Logic is?
I do not.
Okay. That's fair.
I have no idea.
He's like 31 and he just retired, so you'll probably never know who he is. But this is Logic talking about how hard he works every day. Yay.
Well, if he's able to retire at 31, he obviously did something well.
That's right. And he took the Kanye thing too literally, and I think he moved to like a Montana or something. He left Los Angeles and is now out in the middle of nowhere.
I have a friend that passed away a few years ago. He was a multimillionaire by 39, decided to retire and play golf, got bored 3 months later, and decided to go back to work and made a few more million. So
I don't know that I'll ever make that much, but if someone wants to hand it over, I will gladly take that money and run and retire. I don't know what I'd do with myself, but I'd figure something out. I'm pretty sure. All right, it is that time of day where we get into On This Day. And first, we've got to look back before we head to birthday. So let's do some sports history right now. All right, on this day in 1936, Babe Ruth turned down the Reds to come back as a player. At that point in his life, he was looking to be a manager. Could you imagine having Babe Ruth as your manager?
I cannot see Babe Ruth as a manager, no.
I mean, as a manager and then as Babe Ruth. That would be hard to overcome, I think, as a player.
I think a lot of times star players don't make good coaches. It's like when Tim Duncan decided to coach for a year or two with the Spurs. I never felt like that was going to go anywhere. He's got way more important things to do than coach.
Well, that was on this day in 1936. Moving to 1958, George Yardley of the Pistons became the first NBA player to score 2,000 points in a season. For comparison, Karl Malone later had 12 seasons with 2,000 points. Michael Jordan had 11. Kobe Bryant had 4. And LeBron currently has 3. So the first in 1958, and to think of where we are now with,
and
buckets.
without a 3-point shot.
Oh, yeah. And now the NBA just rains threes. If anyone watched that NBA All-Star game this weekend, it became who can shoot the three from the furthest mark.
Exactly.
And that was Dame Dalla.
Threes are dunks. That's all that matters.
Dame Dalla and Seth Curry going after it during that All-Star weekend. 1961 on this day, Wilt Chamberlain of the NBA, Philadelphia Warriors scored 67 points against the New York Knicks. The Warriors beat the Knicks 135-126. The Philadelphia Warriors. That really was before my time.
That was before mine too. And they were on their way to Oakland by the time I was born. So, and Wilt had a 100-point game at one correct time. I don't remember the date, but Wilt scored 100 a game once.
Yes, and he kept getting better and better at that point. But the Warriors beating the Knicks, whether they were Philadelphia or not, that does sound familiar to us here in the modern era. And finally, baseball awards the franchise to the Tampa Bay Devil Rays on this day in 1995. The Rays, of course, appeared in the last World Series against the Dodgers, which they lost 4-2. But hey, they made it there.
I'll tell you what. I wish San Antonio had enough money to move the Tampa Bay Rays to San Antonio, keep them in the American League East, and play Boston, New York, and Toronto, and Baltimore every year. That is a great organization and greatly run organization.
They don't get fans in the stands, though.
They play in the worst ballpark in the history of ballparks. And they play in a community where nobody cares about baseball. They need to have that team in Tampa where there's actually fans that would go and not in St. Petersburg where nobody goes.
Well, we did have someone just ask us on our video feed about San Antonio having an MLB franchise. So I love that you bring that up there. I think it'd be great.
If somebody's got about $3 billion that they're not afraid to just spend randomly, it's possible. Outside of that,
I mean, I love we have the Round Rock Express here in the Central Texas area. They're just a short drive away from Austin, but I'd love to have an MLB team a little bit closer than the Houston Astros and the Texas Rangers. All right, that does it for sports history today, which means it's now time for sports birthdays. The Pirate, Mike Leach, turned 60 today. He was born in 1961. He, of course, is now the head coach of the Mississippi Bulldogs. Great follow on Twitter. If you don't follow him, he often tweets hilarious memes. Of course, last year he did get in trouble for tweeting one meme that was a little inappropriate. He had to apologize, had to be off Twitter for a little bit. I guess he gave himself a timeout on that one. He's also on Cameo. For those that don't know what Cameo is, it's basically a service that you can sign up for, and people will pay you to do videos, shout outs, what have you. He has done numerous of them. You can actually go to Cameo and watch some of the ones that he's done. They're pretty fantastic. People have done wedding shout outs with him, just birthday wishes, just paying him to say random things. Mike Leach is the ultimate
character. He was at Texas Tech.
Yes.
He had a lot of great lines.
He is a personality and a pretty good football coach, too. I mean, he doesn't get those jobs because he's not good at his job.
He may not beat Alabama and Auburn, but he can probably beat the rest of the SEC.
There you go. And when you're in the SEC, that's about all you need. If you can play against them and hold against them well, win or lose, I think you'll be all right. All right. In 1980, Matt Barnes, he turns 41 today. He was drafted in 2002 to the Memphis Grizzlies, where he was immediately traded and sent down to the D-League. And then in March of 2017, during his final year with the NBA, he signed with the Warriors and won a championship with the team that same year. And then he retired that December. Pretty nice way to go out on your career, don't you think?
Matt Barnes is kind of the envious basketball player. You make a lot of money for a lot of years, and you're kind of living obscurity, and nobody bothers you.
Yeah. And considering in your final year after such a long career, that's a pretty nice way to go. And finally, fellow Texan, born in Nacogdoches, Texas in 1983, turning 38 years old today, Clint Dempsey. Most of us know him as Captain America when he served as captain of the U.S. national soccer team in the 2014 World Cup. They performed better than they had in recent years, but of course, ultimately didn't make it very far. And they didn't even make the 2018 World Cup, to major disappointment. It resulted in a new head coach for that national team. Clint Dempsey, of course, is now retired. Are you a big national soccer fan?
No,
Soccer
I'm
in
not a big
general?
soccer fan in general.
No?
I've attempted to watch. I don't get it, and it's not in my wheelhouse.
Not in your wheelhouse. That's fair.
You know,
That's
I find it interesting that women's soccer in the United States has won World Cups and has been on the world stage and is amongst the best in the world. And men's soccer hardly even gets in the top 50, if even that. And my only thought is that when athletes start to get to an age to where they know they're going to specialize in a sport, that is usually not the one they choose in the United States because the other leagues have so much more television money and ability for them to make money. There's not while there's international soccer stars that do well, and it's big in South America, it's big in Europe, it's big pretty much everywhere in the world except the United States. We don't really see that a lot. I mean, LeBron James is going to be a billionaire athlete. Tiger was once there, probably will get back there at some point with his business endeavors. But the American soccer star kind of gets third or fourth fiddle sometimes.
Yeah, if the pay disparity between international soccer star, where you have the Messi's making $100 million plus a year just on his contract alone, versus the male U.S. star and then the female U.S. star is a little concerning at times, but hopefully things will start to even out. I know the Austin area is super excited. The Austin FC season begin this year. That stadium is beautiful. I drive by it all the time. I'm so excited to actually set foot in there when the season does get kicked off. Moving on to the Salty Shakedown. Let's start with Tom Brady, a guy who also is in negotiations for a contract with his current team, Tampa Bay. He surprised me again. I guess he really is trying to get me on his side here and liking him, but he shouted out his niece on Twitter the other day after UCLA posted a video of her knocking a homer out of the park to send 2 already on base to score 3 runs for UCLA softball. Her name is Maya Brady, the niece of Tom Brady. And he says that she is actually the most dominant Brady in the family. Pretty high praise from Uncle Tom there, don't you think?
Well, I admire the fact that the bloodlines run well, but she's got a ways to go to get 10 Super Bowls.
Right.
And hopefully she has a incredibly successful career at UCLA, but 10 Super Bowls trumps everything, I think.
Listen, I love pop culture, I love sports, I love kind of getting to know small little fun things and details about their lives, but I do not look into their families and then what their families do and that kind of creepiness. That's too far down the rabbit hole. So I had no idea he had a niece until this, but I thought it was great and great to see that she is a successful athlete as well and carrying that Brady name proudly. Moving on to the NFL, Jersey. We're already in the NFL. Let's keep the NFL. Moving on to Jersey leagues. The Bengals, we know, are getting new jerseys this year, and they were just leaked online yesterday, and people hate them. They are not fans of their tiger stripe they have on the shoulders. They say they'll probably look great on the players once those shoulder pads are added. But the stripes for those that just want to purchase the jerseys, right? And that's kind of the big reason why the NFL tends to change the jerseys around because, well, everyone's bought the jerseys. They don't want to have more than one, so let's change the jersey situation up. And people keep buying more, but people don't think they're going to look very good because of the way they kind of put those Bengals stripes on the shoulders of these new jerseys. We have yet to get official confirmation. Of course, this was leaked, so we don't know 100% that these are the new jerseys. And maybe after the backlash, they will ultimately change them. Have you seen them yet, Andy?
I have not. But here's my thing on jerseys. I was born way too soon because back in the day, and this kind of reveals my age. There wasn't a Dick's Sporting Goods or an Academy or an online shop where you could go buy authentic gear. My grandmother made me a Johnny Bench jersey out of a T-shirt and stick-on labels, iron-on labels, and that was my jersey when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I wore it proudly until I wore it out. But you could go to the sporting goods store and buy a generic uniform, but you couldn't buy authentic anything. And so I needed to be about 25 years later. I would have been able to hop online and and buy whatever my favorite athlete's jersey was, but
never had that chance back in the day.
That's incredible. I thought you were going to say Halloween costume, but the fact that you wore that jersey nearly every day, that is super impressive. Shout out to your grandmother for doing that for you.
We had a baseball game in our backyard every day. It was Game 7 of the World Series every day at Everett Field.
Isn't it all? Game 7 of the NBA Finals was my thing.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, that too.
Also leaked yesterday, the 49ers and Browns throwback jerseys that do feature a drop shadow number. That stylized number seems to be pretty popular these days. But in that discussion of what the jerseys look like, the Browns all white. People are wanting the NFL is up for discussion for them to change the one shell rule. So people are hoping that does indeed happen, that they do away with it, because I think the Browns all white uniforms look great with a white helmet. Or what do you think about this one shell rule?
Well,
it's not something talked about a lot, but
yeah, some colleges have different helmets for different games. UTSA, I know, does, and
some colleges have different helmets. Oregon, I think, does. And the NFL and I think that's okay. And the NFL is concerned that the player's going to like one helmet over the other and want to wear it because it's more comfortable or more protective. But in this day, you can make the helmets identical and just put whatever labels you want on them. I don't think that's a problem, but I know the NFL is really concerned about safety, and obviously for the quarterback and the middle linebacker, you got to put the wireless stuff in those helmets.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's I wish they would do away with it as well.
I think it's where they'll get caught up, because we talk about the jerseys. They sell a lot of jerseys. I don't know that. I know they can afford it, but I don't know that anyone's going out and buying full-size helmets for their collection. People typically listen to the tiny helmets.
Yeah, well, I guess from a buying standpoint, from a public standpoint, whoever buys it will buy whatever one they like. But from a player standpoint, the league makes $12 billion a year. They can have 10 helmets each and still have money left over.
I do like the idea of seeing different helmets.
The one thing I applaud the NFL, though, is that no matter what they do to the jerseys,
the numbers contrast well.
The numbers contrast well.
You can actually see the numbers.
And when you're looking from, please see the numbers. And too many colleges go with this Oregon theme, and they put metallic numbers on a jersey that you can't see. And from a broadcaster's perspective, you're sitting up there trying to guess who the player is because you can't see the number. And the fans in the stands can't see them either. They look great on HD TV. But these metallic silver numbers on a light colored jersey, then the fluorescent light or the sun hits them, and you have no idea who the player is.
Yeah, Charlie Strong brought chrome Longhorn decals to the Longhorn helmets during his time, and I myself, as well as many others, hated them.
Yeah.
Did not. I just,
there's something about
that. I mean, I would think Cowboys fans with this helmet thing would say, no, we want our traditional helmet. That is the look of America's team. Let's keep it that way.
They've worn white helmets before, haven't they?
I'm sure. Yeah, Sam says yes. But as far as mixing it up a little too much, going by way of the Oregons, I don't see that happening. But a little helmet change from time to time, like for the Thursday night games, color rush games. I think that'd be a pretty good idea. All right, finally, Urban Meyer, of course, is now the head coach of Jacksonville Jaguars. So the Fox Sports Big Noon Kickoff needs to find a replacement, and they found none other than Bob Stoops. No, thank you. As a Texas fan, I say it was bad enough having Urban Meyer there when we had Tom Herman as our head coach, and now you want to have Bob Stoops sitting up there with USC alums, Matt Leinart, and Reggie Bush. Not to mention, Texas usually ends up on Fox, and it is the main talking point of discussion for that big noon kickoff when they play Texas and OU, because that game typically takes place at 11. In fact, that whole group tends to be there live from Dallas during that game. I don't know how good Bob Stoops is going to be in the booth. I do think it's an interesting choice, but as a Texas fan, I am not here for it. I don't need any more slander. It keeps getting added to our wheelhouse.
Well, I could go OU on you here, but I won't. To me, I don't care who's on TV. I mean, Bob Stoops does a great job. Good for Bob Stoops. I'm sure there were other candidates, and The fact that he was, they want a successful name guy is all they want. They probably could have gotten an unsuccessful, unnamed guy that would have done just as good a job of breaking things down. But Bob Stoops is a name, and he'll help them sell commercials, so that's why they chose him. And we'll see how things go. We should have well, see, Chris is pretty neutral when it comes to OU and Texas, although I think he slides a little bit towards Texas because he lives here.
Right.
And I've said this for the last 20 years. When I grew up in Oklahoma, you were born to not like Texas. You wanted them to lose every game. And if you were a Texas fan, the same for OU.
Mm-hmm.
But we need each other now because our wins are irrelevant if the other team is terrible.
That is true. But I still am always going to root for whoever is playing OU. That's just my nature. That's the burn orange blood runs through me, and it runs through me deep, and I don't think that is ever going to change. Poor Sooners.
It's your favorite team is Texas, and whoever's playing OU. I understand.
Exactly. I have a T-shirt that says those exact words. That wraps up the Salty Shakedown for the day. Coming up next, we've got Tanner Carlton in studio. He's going to join us. We'll keep that Dak Prescott discussion going. That huge contract is the story of the day, and Cowboys fans rejoicing across the nation because they are America's team. Head over to AM 1300 Ticket 760 to vote on our poll on their sentence chance. You give the Cowboys head to the playoffs in the next 4 years. You are listening to the Chris Duel Show on AM 1300 Zone Ticket 760.
Be right back.
Yeah, Mr. Tobias, I've seen the pictures. I just don't know that I've seen them in action, those white helmets for the Cowboys. Yeah, 1960s. I guess maybe they did wear them once when they did the throwback this last year for the celebration game. Yeah, guys, I don't know what's happening with the Echo today. The only thing we have different is Andy from Frisco. Yeah, Leo, women's soccer not super popular outside of the U.S., but the teams themselves are getting better as the countries are putting more into their programs. There are also a lot of countries that do have women's programs, but they're not year-round, so they only come together for the World Cup, and so those women have 9 to 5s the other 3.5 years, and then they come together, and it's also partly why the U.S. is so dominant because they actually train year in and year out. Yeah, the Thanksgiving game, I think, was the throwback game. That was also where they had Kane Brown performing, right? And everyone was upset that it was pre-recorded. I think they were also upset that it was Kane Brown performing. 2015 Cowboys Super Bowl championship tattoo. How big is it, Jason? If you happen to know, like how big of a cover-up job is that?
Okay.
Leo wants to know what school has the coolest semis who deliver equipment for road trips.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
The Texas one was redone 2 or 3 years ago. I think it could use another wrap on it now that it's been 2 or 3 years, but it was redone. I hate to say it, but OU's is pretty cool. They obviously park them outside the Cotton Bowl and for all to see during the games.
Those guys are those drivers are crazy too, because we had a game at where was it? At Norfolk, Virginia against Old Dominion, and they left on Thursday morning at 10 and got there Friday night. There's 2 guys, they alternate driving. It's like 23 straight hours to get there.
That's like tour drivers.
Yeah,
that's insane.
And I guess our trip to Florida International a few years ago and Florida Atlantic last year was even longer, but they got to get there.
Jason says the 2015 Dallas Cowboys Super Bowl championship tattoo is palm size. That's one palm size too big. I wonder if it was part of a bet.
Who did this?
Jason says a gentleman named Derek, who Sam knows, has one. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, how there are people who go and get these Super Bowl tattoos at the beginning of the season. Like, just wait. I tweeted it to me. Oh, Jason, it's awful. That man now has to wear a t-shirt when he goes swimming, whether he wants a tan or not. You can't show that off. And no hate to the designer, but it's also just not a great tattoo in general, champion or not.
I'm not into those. No tattoos for me.
Oh, yeah, I hate needles.
I don't mind needles because I get shots all the time and blood tests and all that kind of stuff, but I don't want something permanent on my body that I may not like tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't like when I get like ink pen on my hand. I have to wash it off immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
A tattoo.
Did you graduate from UTSA or just go there?
I did the CAT program.
Okay.
So I was there for my freshman year and transferred. Leo, I feel like some places, I know like Texas X's, they do away game buses that you can pay for, but I don't know that they wrap the buses. I think they do. I think they're just charters.
Charters, yeah.
And then they do the same, a lot of Fraternities and sororities do the same.
Mm-hmm.
There he is.
Hey, guys.
Hey there.
I can figure this camera out.
Are you just elated? Have you come down yet?
Oh, no, I'm still on top of the world right now. I haven't even had a celebratory margarita.
How was Dallas?
Oh, it was fun. I mean, it was they were super strict. Like in the American Airlines Center, they
ask what that was. We may talk about that if we have time.
Yeah, if you had a drink, I had a drink in my hand, and I had my mask down, and I was drinking out of it, and I didn't put my mask like immediately back up, and I got chastised by the usher, and she was like, "When you take a drink, you have to put it right back up." I was like, "Oh, okay, all right, I'll do that." But yeah, they were like super strict. Anytime you ate popcorn or something, if you just could only take down, just put it in your mouth, and then you had to put your mask back up.
Golly, I mean, because were y'all spaced apart?
Oh yeah, we had a group of 8, but we were only allowed to have people sitting together in groups of 2. That's your mic.
See,
cool.
That's weird. And then you think of restaurants.
And then
you can go to restaurants and sit there.
Oh, okay. From in there. Okay, cool. Yeah, and then I've got the talk back. I got the TV, so yeah, cool. Anyway, sorry, what, Shannon?
Oh, you can go to a restaurant and sit there and have your meal without your mask on the entire time. I figure if you're spaced.
Yeah, and I think that's where people have the biggest issue is the inconsistencies as to like you can go one place and do this, but if you go to another place, you can't do that.
This is the Chris Duel Show.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side, yeah.
Now, Chris Duel.
Final hour of the Chris Duel Show on a Taco Tuesday. Ticket 760 AM 1300 The Zone. By the way, if you want to jump in on this Dak conversation, 1-800-707-9760. We'd love to get your thoughts. Dallas Cowboys fans, Dallas Cowboys haters, we love them all. I'm joined today by Andy Everett, who is in Frisco, biggest Puma holding things down in San Antonio. And right now, Tanner Carlson is in studio in San Antonio because we know he has a couple things to say about Mr. Dak Prescott. And I'm sure he's still on a high.
I'm the most excited person in the building today. I've got cowboy gear on today.
I can see that.
I've been asking for this for the last 2 years now, and it finally happened. So thank God for Stephen Jones and
getting this thing done.
Yeah, you've been the lead campaign manager on this for a while.
You know, Dak's party should actually probably just hire me.
Right.
Because I think it was me pushing this on Twitter that
yeah, where's your 10% of that 164 million?
I'll take that. I would be set up very nicely.
About 1%.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but if you can get 10, I mean,
exactly.
So I'm going to start you off with this, Tanner, because we're asking our listeners today what percentage they give the Dallas Cowboys to make the Super Bowl within the next 4 years now that Dak is our man. I say our man because we are delusional Cowboys fans. And as Cowboys fans, Dak or not, we always think it's our year to get to the Super Bowl. But now we should have a little bit more realistic expectations because having a franchise quarterback is a huge part of it. So we're doing percentages 0 to 25, 26 to 50, 51 to 75, or 76 to 100. Both Andy and I are in that third tier, 50 to 75, just because they're in the NFC East. So that means they should get to the playoffs. And once you're in the playoffs, your chances are there. It's all in front of you.
Yeah, and I think now that Dak is locked up, this is no longer prove it to Dak. This is you've now got your contract, and so here are the expectations set for you to lead this team. This is overcome your entire team's deficiencies in terms of the horrible defense, the sketchy offensive line play, the injuries. This is we're paying you money to overcome all those deficiencies on this team. Even though we don't have a Super Bowl roster, you're getting paid to at least get us into the playoffs and win some playoff games from here on out. So yeah, I would put him in the third tier. I'd say that 50-75, but the team, the roster built around Dak, it's not a Super Bowl winning roster. It's just not. They're not that good. I think people like to put the star on the helmet and say, "Oh, this guy's a Pro Bowler." That's not necessarily the case. The offensive line is in shambles when it comes to injuries and the unknowns of Leo Collins, Tyron Smith. We don't really know what we have in the center, and we don't know exactly what we have in Connor Williams over there. The only guarantee is that Zach Martin's going to be an all-pro caliber player on the offensive line. So, and then the rest of that defense is a lot of question marks as well. So, but you pay a quarterback this kind of money because you think that he can get you to the playoffs year in, year out. And like you said, in the NFC East, that should be a annual thing, at least for the rest of his contract that he's currently through. So through 2025, the Dallas Cowboys should be NFC East champions every single year.
That's what I was going to say is that they may not be a Super Bowl roster yet, but they're an NFC East champion roster at least.
Definitely 100%. And that to me is the floor in terms of the standard that you're looking at for the Dallas Cowboys while you have Dak Prescott under contract.
And this news came down just before 6 o'clock last night, of course. The deadline for the franchise tag is supposed to hit later today. There was some concern that it might actually get pushed back. It was looking like it will, in fact, end today. Were you surprised at the timing? Because it got to the point where I was under the impression they were just going to tag him and then they'd eventually sign him, but we were going to continue to have this conversation.
I think if you're not surprised that when this all went down, I think you're lying to yourself, because I don't even think Schefter, James Slater, Edmore, I don't think the guys closest to the Cowboys organization even saw this thing coming. I don't know if they even heard of any rumors going on. Last I had heard, there wasn't even really serious talks about it going on. So, I think the timing of this, I was 100% expecting to go into this offseason with Dak and franchise tag for sure.
They went straight from the talking phase to marriage and children, like immediately, like a drop of a dime. But it was great.
They've been courting each other a long time.
Yeah. And to your point, you mentioned the Adam Schefter's and the James Slaters of the world. The first tweets we got was, "There's a deal. There's a Dak Prescott deal." And so I'm like, okay, but what kind? Did they tag him again? Do we actually have a deal that we all want? What's the deal? And for it to be what it is, I mean, it looks like both sides are getting what they want out of this, right? They're getting Dak for hopefully all 4 years. He's going to be 31 when he's able to get a next contract, which will probably be even larger, assuming he doesn't get hurt and does perform the way he has in the past several years. Both sides seem to really be the winners in all this. Now, looking ahead, he's 31. Do you want to re-sign Dak again?
Well, I think the team, I'm calling it a short-term, long-term deal because it's only 4 years. It's not like you've got this guy locked down for that long of a time. So I think the Cowboys are actually kind of setting themselves up in terms of, well, if he doesn't get anything done in terms, I think minimal. If he doesn't get him to at least one NFC conference championship, if they're not one game away from the Super Bowl, then I think they might just go ahead and part ways with them at that point in time. I think this contract is the Dak, you've got to get it done. You've got to get this team over the hump. You've got to get them to a conference championship game. You've got to get them to a Super Bowl. Now, winning a Super Bowl or not winning a Super Bowl, I think that's neither here nor there. I think getting to the game or at least getting further than what this team has been to in the last 25 years, I think that's where the primary objective is for Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, and the rest of his coaching staff is that they believe Dak is the guy to get him over that hump.
And if he doesn't, I think this sets them up to where both parties can be happy in parting ways and maybe going in a different direction. But I think he is the guy to do that. If he does get into a conference championship game or Super Bowl, I think they extend him past this contract and even add on a few more years.
Well, his agent by the end of the second year of this deal, maybe the third, but probably by the end of the second, is going to start asking for an extension.
Right.
And so I think this is a long-term deal, like you said, but it's also very short-term. And this team better get to win a playoff game this year, even if they're only the NFC East champion. Win a playoff game, get to the NFC Championship in year 2, get to a Super Bowl in year 3, win one by year 4. And if that is the case, then he gets paid for services rendered, and whatever the market value is, probably $50 million at the time. That's what he gets for his final contract. But if after 2 years they're 8-8 and they're barely beating Washington, New York, and Philadelphia, then it may be time to move in another direction, because the biggest concern I have with this contract is how are you going to be able to get other players around him that are going to make you a winning team?
And that's kind of where I was at last week whenever we were talking about getting this deal done for Dak. And Chris had asked me a similar question. I said, you have to have a quarterback if you want your free agent signings and moves to be successful. The number one goal is to have that quarterback. Now that we have that quarterback, we may not be able to have all the pieces put in place for free agents, but that's why this year specifically when you have 10 draft picks, you're probably thinking if you've got 10 draft picks, 3 or 4 of those guys have to be immediate contributors on the team next season. You're looking for immediate contributions on rookie deals because they're cheap and they can play
big minutes for you, especially on a very weak defense that needs all the help they can get.
So I'm more on the side of you got now draft well and develop those players. The Dallas Cowboys have to start developing the talent that they draft, or else they won't see us regardless of how many free agents or lack that they have.
Yeah, that's where Mike McCarthy really comes in. I think this is kind of his do or die year, especially now that they do have Dak locked in for them for the next couple of years. Now, last year, the unthinkable happened with Dak. He goes down, horrible injury. It's hard to look at. I hate when that picture just randomly pops up on my feed because I'm over it. I get it. He broke his foot. I don't need to see it. I understand. I was there. I watched it. I cried. It's fine. We all cried. Dak cried. Colt McCoy patted him off going off the field. It was an awful experience for a lot of people. And then we had the Red Rifle come in, and he's a vet. We thought he'd handle himself a little bit better. Of course, he has COVID issues with Ben DiNucci, who looked like, like it was a little kid that they pulled out of the stands for like a halftime experiment. Come play on the Dallas Cowboys field. Once in a lifetime opportunity. It's your shot. He looks horrible. So now we're in this position. We've got Dak. We do need a backup. Every team needs a backup. Is there a guy that you'd like to see the Cowboys go after now that they have Dak?
I don't know about if free agency is the place where I'm looking for a backup.
There's our big names out there.
Now that we've paid all this money to our starting quarterback, we may not be able to afford a backup
in free agency.
So
unless you're going to get an old veteran guy who's just kind of like hanging around, maybe like a Ryan Fitzpatrick, but he's still kind of an upper end backup in terms of how much money you're going to have to pay for. I would like to look at the draft. I think late round, if you go, I'm going to bring it up again. I think Sam Ellinger, if you steal him in the 5th or 6th round, I think that would be a great upgrade over Ben DiNucci, Gilbert. And then Ian Book from Notre Dame probably isn't going to be high on a lot of draft boards in terms of early rounds. You could maybe sneak in the Notre Dame quarterback. He's the winningest Notre Dame quarterback of program history. So why not give him an opportunity at least, maybe 6th, 7th round, maybe he can still stick around and use one of those later draft picks on a rookie that you can maybe develop into a solid.
Tanner, if you were picking for the Cowboys in the first round, you go offensive line first or defense first?
It's such a good question.
It's such a good question.
I have to go defense.
I've got to get that secondary shirt. I've got to get some corners. I got to get some help Diggs. And I don't think now all this money going to Dak. I think Awuzie might be the biggest loser here as he's set to free agency. I don't think Dallas brings him back. I don't think Dallas brings back Jordan Lewis either. Both those two guys in the same draft class. I think they're both gone. So now you're just looking for bodies on the field in terms of secondary corners. So I think you have to go corner as early as possible. And I think you double dip at corner later on in the draft as well. So I think you go first round, you go corner. You got one of the three guys there available at 10. You take one of those three guys at 10, and then maybe you go and return to that position maybe third round as well.
Yeah, Dallas certainly needing to fix up a lot of other pieces of their roster now that they've got Dak in place. Of course, on Wednesday, we will hear more from the Dallas Cowboys with an official press conference announcing Dak's contract. Hopefully, they will lead us into the future a bit with their plans. Of course, knowing Jerry, his plan is typically to have no plan. So we'll see where things end up. Now, Tanner, you were actually in Dallas over the weekend. You had a bachelor party. We'll get to that. But first, I know you went to a Dallas Stars game, and I have not been to a sporting event in over a year. So I'm really interested to know what your experience was like going to the American Airlines Center to watch a Dallas Stars game. Good, bad, ugly. How was it? Would you do it again?
The game itself was great. Dallas won 5-0 and beat a team that they don't play very often because they're usually in a different conference. So that was a really cool experience. And then I got to see the rookie get his first career shutout. So some cool moments in the game itself. We were sitting there in the crazy weird thing about it is that you really have to go online and just find whatever's available because they're going to have you in a pair of two. You just get to sit with one other person, and then there's basically a blocked off row between you and the next pair of people. And so there was actually a family that was sitting way down the row from us, and they asked if they could switch seats with one of the groups that we had sitting with us, and because their kids were separated from parents, and their kids were in a whole other section. It's just a bizarre thing that they have to do, and so we obviously traded with them, and
sounds like Splash Mountain,
same row, still weren't sitting next to each other. And then another really crazy thing was I had a beer in my hand. I had my mask on. I took my mask off to drink my beer. I had my beer in my hand. I put my mask back up as soon as I put the beer down. And I got ridiculed by the usher yelling at me to put my mask back up right after. Immediately after I took a sip of my beer. So they were extremely strict when it came to eating, drinking anything. We had to mask down. As soon as you put whatever it is you were putting in your mouth, you had to put that mask immediately back up as quickly as possible.
Is she a Karen, or is she doing her job, or maybe she's just a Karen who has that job?
It really was her just doing her job. I think American Airlines Center, I think the Dallas, I think everybody is really strict in just terms of I think they were, because it wasn't just her, it was every usher going around keeping an eye on you as to what you were doing. So yeah, I think it's just she's a good person put in a really bad job, a really tough job in terms of having to tell everybody as soon as you put that piece of popcorn in your mouth, you're getting kicked out. So we had a couple of warnings just because we were being belligerent and having a good time at the bachelor party. So they were fairly lenient with us. And one of our party goers didn't make the whole game. But it was a good time nonetheless. It wasn't any issue. They were just really strict, which I think they need to be in that kind of thing. So would I go again?
During this time, during the COVID time.
I might wait a little bit longer. I might just wait a little bit longer.
In 6 months, football season starts, 1st of September, and Texas is one of several schools that have already said we're expecting 100% capacity by September. I'm not sure that they may say that that's 100% open, but I don't think there's going to be 100% capacity in any stadium this year. And that's from a fan perspective.
We also got that from Del Conte
for this last season started.
Oh yeah,
50%, right? 50%,
capacity or whatever. So, and that didn't even come close to happening.
Yeah. Try to. I guess typically you undersell and overachieve, but they're kind of doing the opposite in this case. Now, what was the entry process like going into AT&T, or excuse me, American Airlines Center for this? Did they take your temperature? Did you have to go through 8 different metal detectors and a COVID sensor? And did they have the COVID dogs like they have in Miami where they're sniffing you out?
No COVID
No
dogs.
COVID dogs. You have to scan
basically
like you're at a restaurant or
scan
something. You scan the little menu
and
thing, and then you answer a questionnaire. Basically,
the only thing I don't like about that is
anybody can just lie.
They're not
showing any symptoms.
Whatever. So it's not like they're
making sure and
your temperature
checking
or
your temperature or anything at the
kinda
door. They were just kind of like,
here's
a survey, fill it out, and then
you get in and you just answer the right questions anyway, so you get in. And then there's just the one metal detector that you walk through. It was a fairly simple process. The great thing about it is there's only 40 people in line, so it goes by fairly quickly. There's nobody.
Was it hard to find beer? Because I imagine they didn't have every single concession stand open.
Yeah, I think they had like every other concession open, but again, there wasn't a lot of people there, so the line intermission between periods. There was only like one or two people in front of you.
Now, Andy, he was in Dallas for a bachelor party, and as I recall, you were the one that was planning all of this, right? You took the lead on this. How are you grading yourself for this last weekend?
I'd give it an A.
I'd give it an A. We did a good job in terms of we went to a restaurant, and it was one of the restaurants within the little square of Victory Lane at American Airlines. If anyone's actually been there, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
We went to one of the restaurants,
sitting right there, right by the stadium. And then we went right back to our Airbnb and just played card games and just kind of hung out. None of us really felt like we wanted to go to like bars, go bar hopping or go around town. We just like that. We
back to the place,
had some beers, played some games, stayed up
3 a.m.
and woke up extremely miserable the next day. But other than that, I would say
solid A.
Good. And I know you were kind of worried that the Airbnb hosts were going to find out that you were there for a bachelor party because they were a little concerned that y'all were coming up. But I think, to me, it sounds like y'all did all right, made out all right on this one.
I think we did as the best we could, and given the circumstances, I think we made.
There you go. Now that we do have you here, I do want to get your thoughts really quickly on Les Miles. Of course, you an avid Texas fan, so very in tune to the Big 12. This obviously impacts it in some way, even though it is Kansas football. But Les Miles no longer the head coach up there in Lawrence. Your thoughts on this pretty swift act by Kansas this week?
It needed to be swift.
It needed to be as quick as possible. And getting him out of there. Now, are they just going to go from one
next? I think
to the next. I think
they should just go Art
Briles next. Why not? They've just had
horrible history
in terms of head coaches there at KU football.
They should just
hire Art Briles and let him take over from here on out.
Fair enough. Yeah, Art Briles seems to keep getting jobs. Maybe Les Miles will find his place somewhere else. Tanner, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll try to get you later in the week as you know, we're going to hear from Dak soon enough. We haven't. First, Prescott we heard from yesterday was his brother with a picture of the two of them embracing. I thought it was really sweet. We all know Tad Prescott usually has lots to say when it comes to the Cowboys and his brother.
And it's not always
what you want to hear as a Cowboys fan, but a very touching human moment for those athletes that seem like they're larger than life. It was a very human touching moment. Very cool picture. I'm really excited just to hear from Dak and see what he has to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Dak, a couple weeks for him. He's got his little nephew now, and now has a giant contract. That nephew doesn't know it yet, but he's going to get some amazing presents when he turns 1 year old. All right, we're moving into the final segment of today's show. Thank you so much, Tanner, for joining us for this recent segment. We'll wrap things up here. We'll hit the full push one more time. We'll talk a little more Dak, a little more Les Miles, a little more hot topics in the world of sports. Again, you can always dial us up 1-800-707-976. We'd love to hear from you. And hit us on Twitter. We're always there. We're always here on the live feed as well, Facebook, YouTube. This is the Chris Duel Show on AM 1300 The Zone and Ticket 760.
Okay.
Andy, do you have your computer volume on by chance?
I do not. I have it muted with the earpiece.
It may have just been because he was using his phone and it wasn't me. Sorry, guys. Yeah, you'd think that we would have our texts here in the mornings when live shows are going on, but it's just not the case. And my engineering technology background only goes so far. But you can always mute the video and listen on the app. They're pretty in sync.
Okay. Perfect.
You change your mind like a girl changes clothes. Yeah, you PMS like a girl.
Andy, name the song.
And you
There you go. Miss Katy Perry. What a way to end the day.
Go.
Hot and cold. Hottest stories of today, obviously, being Dak Prescott and his huge contract for the Dallas Cowboys worth $164 million. Not bad for a guy who already makes $50 million a year from endorsements as the franchise quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. I would imagine he may get more now that they know he's here to stick around for a little bit.
I'm sure they're lining up.
Another big headline today being Les Miles and KU parting ways following those 2013 allegations against sexual harassment for Les Miles popping up from his time at LSU. And I was just, looking around the Twitterverse and seeing if any new comments popped up about the new vacancy up there in Lawrence. And a lot of people are mentioning a name we're all too familiar with, Tom Herman, who, of course, just took a job with the Chicago Bears as an analyst. Now, it wouldn't be crazy for a guy to leave a job who just got a job for another job because it's seemingly a better job. But how crazy would that be that Tom Herman would finally get to follow in the footsteps of Les Miles? It would just be at Kansas and not LSU.
Well, I don't really want to disrespect Kansas, but they've done nothing for the last 40 years to be relevant in football. I think they had 1 year in 2010 or 2011 where they got up to in the top
5, and then it was back to where they were after that. And I'm not sure why Kansas doesn't
recruit. Obviously, there's not a lot of football players in Kansas that you can recruit to. Kansas State has done well going to the JUCO ranks. They're competing up the road from Nebraska, down the road from Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Missouri's going to get a lot of players in the region. For the tradition that is Kansas basketball, they've always gotten who they needed to get there to win. I'm just not sure that it's a good job. And the Jayhawks pay $3-point-something million, or word to Les Miles, I think. So I guess $3 million goes a long ways in Lawrence, Kansas, and you go there and do your best. But like as I said before, if you go 6-6 with that team, that's like winning the national championship because that's about the high watermark for that team. You're not going to beat Oklahoma, Texas. You're probably not going to beat hardly any of the Texas schools, and you're not going to beat Kansas State. There's just not any teams in the league that you can beat on a regular basis. And I don't know how many gimme games you can schedule, a home pay game or something like that against a Division II opponent. Some of those Division II opponents are better than Kansas is. So it's not a great job unless you're just looking for the money that comes with it.
What's in between high school and college football? Kansas. Now, admittedly,
I'm not sure that there's some high school teams that couldn't beat Kansas.
You take some Texas high school teams, they could go up there and show them how it's done. Now, admittedly, when I was a junior in high school, I was hell-bent on getting out of the state and just getting somewhere new for my college career. Ultimately, that didn't happen as I am a Longhorn through and through. But Kansas was my choice destination. And I went for a college visit. The only college visit that I really took during my time in high school was to Lawrence. And I just remember the big selling point they tried to have was they were upgrading their football stadium, and we stayed in the new hotel that was on campus that had a view of the football stadium. And I thought, so what? If I come here, I am a basketball fan. It's a really cute town, great little strip they've got there. I ended up going to engineering camp over the summer where I got to know the town even more. Of course, we walk past some basketball players. Those are, in fact, both literally and figuratively the big man on campus. When it comes to KU, of course, they did not win the Big 12 title this year. That went to Taylor. They're hoping to rebound, though, in the tournament that'll kick off tomorrow. But Kansas is now looking for a head coach. I can't imagine Tom Herman coaching there, but wouldn't it be something if he did after leaving a place like Texas and then to do the unthinkable, like turn Kansas around? Please.
I'll tell you a quick Kansas story. Back when I was in college at OU, the campus radio station allowed us to broadcast the games. And if we could get into a facility on the road, we could do that as well. And one of our games was in Kansas in 1986. And for whatever reason, OU hadn't been on TV. They were the number one team in the nation that year, eventually would lose to Miami in the bowl game. But as most teams lost to Miami. But ABC hadn't put them on TV all year, and it was an early November game, and there wasn't a lot of games to pick from. So ABC said, why not? Let's put the number one team in the country on. And, of course, Kansas, they beat Kansas like 70-3 or some silly score like that. But Keith Jackson and Frank Broyles were calling the game for ABC TV. And it was the first time I'd really ever met the iconic Keith Jackson. I think I'd met him one time before, but now I see him. And at the old Kansas football stadium, there's three levels: writers level, radio level, and the TV/photo level. But there were only two bathrooms in the entire press box, and the women's bathroom was on the radio level, and the men's bathroom was on the writers level. So in order to get to it, you had to go down 2 flights of stairs or take the elevator down two levels. Well, Keith Jackson is walking around up there trying to find a bathroom, and he's not happy about it because there's not one right next to where he's working. And so I had to kind of show him where it was, and he was muttering under his breath, like, why am I in Kansas? Why are we calling this game? This isn't even going to be a game. Is it there someplace else we should be? We should be here for basketball, not for football. And to kind of make that story completely go in circles, I told this story to Ron Thulin, who broadcasts a lot of games regionally in the area, when he was doing a UTSA game a few years ago, and he said, that explains it. And I said, explains what? Well, a few years ago, Nebraska redid their radio TV level, and in their TV booth, they put in a restroom and put Keith Jackson's restroom on the door of the restroom in the television booth. So he wouldn't have to go anywhere.
That's crazy.
So that goes from my original story from 1986, and I guess in 2014 or 12, whenever Nebraska redid their box, Keith Jackson got his wish.
Well, for anyone who's been to Lawrence, Kansas, you know that you don't fly into Lawrence, Kansas. You typically fly into Kansas City, Missouri, and then make the drive. And it's a beautiful drive, but I'm someone, when I go somewhere, I want to land in my destination. And then get going, whatever it is for me to get going on. So that's not necessarily the best. That's a fantastic story. That has its own bathroom now. Has he ever gotten to use it?
I think he retired by the time that he actually was there, and I think he passed away 2 years ago, maybe.
Sorry. Oops, sorry.
But no, he obviously Jackson started calling ABC games back in the 60s, and I think he retired maybe 2010. I want to say was his last year. I know I think he did the Texas USC game in 2007, or 2006, the 2005 season when Texas won the national championship. But I don't recall him doing a lot of games afterwards. And I'm not sure when Nebraska redid its stadium. But they made sure that the broadcasters did not have to leave the booth in order to find a bathroom.
Well, I always appreciate a close bathroom, and even better than that, a personal bathroom. So happy that they did actually make that reno happen there. And big story today as well, Tiger Woods. We talked a lot about Tiger. He told a great story of his time in San Antonio when his credit card was declined. He didn't know he had to activate them. But I did want to get your thoughts a little bit on Bryson DeChambeau. Of course, Tiger texted Bryson on Saturday before he ultimately won the Arnold Palmer tournament, and he said, just keep fighting no matter what happens and play boldly like Palmer. And then Bryson drove a ball 370 yards over a big area of water that most people were just going around. He hit it straight on and made it to the other side. He's definitely changing the game for the better or worse. I don't know. I guess that's up for the viewers to decide, because his putting game still needs some work, right? Because you can get there. You bring the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And if he can't sink those putts, it doesn't matter how long it took him to get over to the green there. But Bryson is he's kind of one of the villains, I think, to me anyway. There's Patrick Reed and then there's Bryson. Bryson's really cocky. He's, all my clothes are the same. And he shows up 40 pounds heavier this season.
Bryson's very, very intelligent. He's got that, I'll refer to it in a polite way, that SMU arrogance.
There you go.
And there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it at SMU. If you've ever been around the SMU people, they think they're better than you are, and sometimes they are. I think it's great. And here's the illustration of this. You remember that Bryson DeChambeau won this golf tournament, but had he not won this golf tournament, the one thing that the fans would have taken from that tournament is that he drove a ball 380 yards on a par 5 and had a sand wedge into the green. And I've played that hole. It's basically a horseshoe hole, and from point A to point B, the way the crow flies, it's 390 yards or 360 or whatever it was, and he could drive it up towards the green if he could fly it that far, which he almost did, or you can play it out safely. But I think the one story that the PGA Tour and the USGA and the R&A need to relate is that day that he hit it 377, Lee Westwood hit it 277, and they made the same score on the hole. So I don't care how far you hit it. It's still about getting your golf ball in the hole in the least amount of shots. And they both made 4 on that hole. And to me, that negates the fact that he hit it 377. I don't care how far they hit it, because eventually they're going to have to putt well, they're going to have to chip well, they're going to have to hit irons well. And the reason that DeChambeau won the U.S. Open last year is because he hit his irons well and he putted well, not because he outdrove everybody. And so that's what I'm hoping that they realize, is that you can hit it as far as you want, but it still comes down to getting the ball in the hole in the least amount of shots.
Bryson's that guy when you go to Topgolf, he just wants to see how far he can hit it. He doesn't care about making it in the little hole areas that give you points. He'd be the one, he's trying to not even hit it far. He's trying to hit it above and over the nets in the back. Like, dude, you're no fun.
Yeah.
We're here to have fun. You are the definition of no fun.
And he's incredibly analytical. I mean, he'll sit there and do the Pythagorean, whatever it is, the formula with the angles and stuff before he gets ready to hit a shot. And you're like, what? Yeah, that one. What language are you speaking? I got a 7-iron. It goes 160, and he's got a 7-iron that goes 210. So there you go.
The commercials where guys are like getting down on the ground and blowing the wind and picking up the one piece of grass that's just taller than the others. That embodies Bryson DeChambeau perfectly. Obviously, the other huge and major story of the day, Dak Prescott getting that contract with the Dallas Cowboys finally. Go get the jerseys, y'all. He's here to stay. We're asking on Twitter, about the Dallas Cowboys and their chances that you give them to make it to the Super Bowl in the next 4 years while Dak Prescott is the franchise quarterback. And most people still saying 0 to 25%. I can't help but think that these are non-Cowboy fans, that they are specifically Cowboy haters, and they are purposely voting in the 0 to 25%, because me, as a delusional Cowboys fan, yet sometimes realist, I do believe they're in that 51 to 75% chance range, just because they can get into the playoffs by being the NFC East champions, and I think that's very likely for them to do multiple times within his tenure at Dallas.
I'm sure social media is filled with, he's not worth it. How are they doing this? Why'd they do this? And like I said, when we were talking about Tiger earlier, we like to tear down our stars. We like them when they do well for us, but when they fail, we can't wait to pile on. And I don't understand why, because your relationship with your favorite player is just that. They entertain you. And what they do off the court, off the field of play, hopefully it's done positively and not criminally. But if they do things positive in your community, which Dak Prescott has, and for that matter, I remember the story a few years ago where Tony Romo stopped and helped somebody change a flat tire. I mean, those are great stories that show the human side of the athletes that we like. But we're always anxious, I think, to tear down people when they've done so much for our enjoyment of sports and entertainment.
See Bernard here on our Facebook feed said, isn't hitting it over the net the definition of fun at Topgolf? No, Bernard, it isn't, because people like me who are still trying to find their swing just want to play for fun and try and get some points by hitting them in the designated holes. Dak Prescott Congratulations. I'm happy for you. All of Cowboys Nation is happy for you. I know your brother is happy for you. That was a very sweet photo that he posted of the two of you embracing. And he specifically said, when your brother gets the call. And I'm sure now, like you said, people will tear him down because of the contract he received. But those same people were arguing for the contract to be done so they could stop hearing about it. So now we'll see in the future. If you think he deserves it, then you can maybe start throwing eggs his way. But for now, just be happy for the guy. He's getting paid, and your quarterback will most likely get paid too. That's right. Andy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Go Cowboys. Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Andy.
He goes a touchdown. Go Cowboys, and yeah, there we go. We'll end it there.
Thank you, Sam. We'll do this again tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. It's been the Chris Duel Show on Ticket 760 and AM 1300, The Zone.
And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make.